Another episode of the Portrait Profits Show. I'm so glad that you're here with me today. My name is Jim Landers, and my mission is simple. I help portrait photographers make a great income doing what they love. Each week on the Portrait Profit Show, you get tips and systems on the business side of photography designed to help you gain a mastery over marketing and sales so you can finally get what you deserve. Welcome to the Portrait Profit Show. You're in the right place. The Portrait Profit Show is brought to you by Digital Pro Lab and Landers Photography School. And you guys, I'm sure know about Digital Pro Lab. At least I sure hope you do, because man, are they fantastic. The team at Digital Pro Lab, who are working with Amanda and Ray, they are wonderful. They are career people. They love what it is that they do, and they make you look like a hero because your work is beautiful. Reach out to the folks at Digital Pro Lab by going to digitalprolab.com. And of course, my own company, Landers Photography School, where I help photographers become better at what it is they enjoy doing, the thing that they're most passionate about. I help photographers, especially on the business side. Now, I've got a lot on the photography side too, a lot of classes, written over 200 classes. So I've got a lot on the photography side, but I really love the business side because it is where photographers are hurting the most. If you're working hard and struggling, I can help with that. So just reach out to me. You can go to landersphotoschool.com or reach out to me directly, Jim at landersphotoschool.com. I look forward to talking to you about your photography business. All right, so today we have a special guest on who knows quite a bit about this subject and has a lot of experience, not only in the photography world, but a lot of other things as well. And our subject today is how I decided on my prices, something that I think we all care about, all think about, something that crosses our mind all the time. Well, often anyway. We think of different ways to, how are we supposed to make our price list, especially when we're starting off. And we look at what other photographers charge. We try to figure out what we're supposed to based on really feelings, but that's not a good way to base your business decisions, is it? Well, you get to decide. It's your business. And so I'm going to bring on our special guest today. Right now, his name is Kevin Saunders. And so I'm going to bring him on. Hey, Kevin.
Hi, how are you doing?
Doing great. I'm so glad you're here with me this evening.
Well, thank you for inviting me into your place and welcome everyone to my studio.
I've been to your studio before. It's a cool place. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and what your goals are, what your philosophies are? Just tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Well, I hope that some of my pathway will resonate with folks because I'm completely self-taught. I was a high school dropout and pre-med in college with an emphasis on anatomy, which has served me very well in editing. But the main thing that I've done throughout the years in 3 other businesses is I learned how to see and learned how to size people up quickly and figure out where they were coming from, because it really doesn't matter where I'm coming from. If we're in the business of making other people happy, it matters where they're coming from. So I started my portrait studio after doing architectural photography, commercial work, and that market imploded. And frankly, a person came into the studio who'd been around the world, saw my work, and he said, "Kevin, you're not putting important enough stuff in front of your camera. You need to be photographing people." And I hadn't really given it much thought. This was 2014, 10 years ago. And I'm a very competitive person, and I've done some high achievement in other fields. And I'm very good at high-end vertical niches. And I saw in the portrait business a problem that painters were having, problems photographers were having, and I saw a niche at the very top, creating wall portraits like you see behind me. So how do you price these things? Well, I bumped along and learned, and I, like many of you, my prices were too low to begin with. I did get on Bradford Rowley's platinum group for a couple of years, but I asked too many questions, and I probably was not a good fit for them, and so we parted company. And I wish all those folks well, but that's how I got a start in the high-end portrait pricing world. So, like many people, when you're used to pricing at a certain level, and you see somebody else that's able to get more money for one work, they think, well, what am I doing wrong? The thing that I hope that I can impart on you folks is the price doesn't matter nearly so much as the value you provide. The price gives you enough income to pay your overhead, do your marketing, pay for all your cost of goods, and maybe make a little profit. Wouldn't that be great? So in my world, where I compete with painters, not photographers. So I've come up with a whole plan to separate myself from photographers, because as you know, a lot of photographers don't know how to price. That's why we have this session today, is to hopefully help you guys learn and have enough guts to raise your pricing. Now, I made some mistakes along the way. I bumped my pricing up early on before I had the volume to support it, and it was pretty scary. So, but I can actually sell a 30 by 40 for $20,000. And I know there's people out there that are selling 30 by 40s for $400. It is possible. But here's something I'd like you to consider. In our world, we do have a niche market, regardless of what our genre is. I happen to be in the formal, traditional portrait business. So that means I'm probably not going to be very good with newborns. I'm not going to be good with a lot of other genres that you all are amazing at. But if you take somebody that is used to looking at paintings, and they have them in their family, and they want something that's going to last 200 years, I got a chance. And so I developed a set of processes to lead them through the studio, step by step by step. And I followed one rule that I hope you guys will remember. In our world, any weakness is a guaranteed point of failure. So if you raise your pricing, you have to raise the value. You have to raise the customer experience. You have to raise your quality. You got to up your game. And it can be overwhelming. So what I've learned over the years is two things. One, I hope you'll have enough guts to raise your pricing, but do it incrementally. Because if you go too far, you can't go back. If I dropped I've had plenty of people, particularly when COVID hit, they said, your prices are too high. You're not competitive with other photographers. Well, at my prices, if I dropped them to be competitive with others, I might have to drop them 90%. What does that say to the people that bought at the prices that I published? They'd feel like they got ripped off. So I had to suck it up and figure out a way to add more value and market outside of San Antonio, because I have a thinner market at the very top than you folks do. So with a lower price point, you can have more volume. And if you have more volume, do you have the infrastructure to handle that volume? I'm 67 years old, and I lost my staff when COVID hit, and I haven't found suitable people to come back. So my wife retired from nursing. She's my assistant on set. And I decided we're going to scale up rather than scale out with more volume. So I'm charging higher prices, lower volume. And on a good month, it's great. On a bad month, in the middle of the summer when everybody's traveling, it can get a little bit scary. So I've learned, just like you all learn, what works and what doesn't. But value is the thing that you offer that separates you from the people who are not as good as you. remember in photography now, it's very different than when I started in 1968. My dad had a Leica M3 and it didn't even have a light meter. So he took me out and he'd say, Kevin, what's that? What's the shutter speed? What's the aperture? He got me to thinking about light way back then. So I can size someone up and take very few shots and make them think like I know what I'm doing. Other people can get a camera from Best Buy and they'll put it on automatic and spray and pray and take 400 shots. And odds are you're going to get a good one. But what is that client experience like if you have to wade through 400 images? Do they think you know what you're doing? So part of this is to up your game in every facet of your business to support the price you want. Pricing is derived from your cost of goods, your overhead, and then your profit. And so that takes a little bit of thought, and each one of you will have a different perspective of what price works for you. The one thing that I'm pretty confident of, however, is you can raise your prices and you can price for profitability.
Thank you. Giving us a lot of good stuff. Especially all the philosophy side and the process side. I appreciate that. I've got a bunch of questions for you. Do you mind?
You bet. Bring them on.
So I'll put them up on the screen, and you've
Okay.
touched on some of these. I just might want a little bit more specifics.
Sure.
So I want you to describe your specific type of photography. Now, you told us some things about what you do. You told us some things that it isn't and did some contrast. But specifically, what is your type of portrait photography? And as you do that, or after you do that, share your just general pricing philosophy.
Okay. What I want to do and what I do are sometimes the same and sometimes differently. I'm in the family portrait business, but my goal is to do the big ones like you see behind me. That's something that not very many people can do. The big one you see behind me, that's an 8-foot portrait, a full-length life-size portrait. And if any of you have seen The Gilded Age on HBO, John Singer Sargent did that stuff way back when. And I was inspired by Yusuf Karsh, who got a portrait of Winston Churchill in 1941 that made the cover of Life magazine. And he had made 700 portraits prior to that. But that was his break. And next thing you know, Karsh was the portrait artist for kings and queens and rock stars and whoever. So in 2014, that's the goal I set, to do the work and earn the reputation of portrait artist of the 21st century. It's a stupid goal. If there's a lot of pain, it's extremely difficult, and I don't recommend you follow in my footsteps. If you want to, rock and roll. But first you have to figure out how to make a portrait like what is behind me. And that, from a pricing perspective, that's $75,000 plus the frame. $5,000 for the frame, $80,000. There are people that want something like that. They probably mostly are not in San Antonio. So I've spent years marketing outside of town. But I do make family portraits. What I try not to do is focus on big families with a lot of small kids. You guys there's a lot of you that are better than I am at that. And that's one thing. I like focusing on couples and solo portraits. So I built my whole studio experience around that high-end product. And yet I still do scads of families just like everybody else. What I don't do are newborns. And in fact, children under 6, as a solo portrait for the sole purpose of them coming in there, I tell them thank you, but at least have some grown-ups in there. So there's some niches that I'm just not that good at. I wanted to be the high-end person because I understand that business. I had a custom bicycle business before that. I had an aviation manufacturing business. So I'm not afraid of a lot of zeros. And I did have to figure out how to market the stuff, which is what you guys have to do as well. So I formed partnerships all over the country with people who have existing relationships, and I do the best I can. So my pricing is from what you would think is just ridiculously expensive. An 8x10 is $2,000. An 11x14 is $4,000. So a 16x20 is $7,000. And I know a lot of you are gasping, thinking, how in the world can people afford that? Well, some of them can and some of them can't. And the people who appreciate stuff like this don't have a problem with the price. The people who freak out, they weren't going to be my customer anyway. Jim, did I help answer that question, or did I ramble?
No, that was good, because that is the point. People do look at that, like you just said. They're looking at they're hearing those prices, and the majority of photographers do not have prices anywhere near that. In fact, the majority have prices that are so low they're not even making a profit.
Indeed.
But they don't know it. But when they hear prices like that, their first thought is, what the heck? I have trouble getting people paying $400. What are you talking about? Are you crazy? No, truth is, they're the one who's crazy for running a business that doesn't even have the potential to be profitable, yet they don't know it yet. And so that's why we do classes like this, to help them understand things that might not have come to the surface before, but can if they allow it. And that's why they're here, because they're allowing that information to flow. And so does everybody need it? I mean, it'd be like saying that there are people who can't afford a Kia, a Toyota. So therefore, we shouldn't have Mercedes and Bugattis because there's people who can't even afford Toyotas. That makes zero sense. There's no logic in that whatsoever. There are people for every price range.
There are.
They get smaller as you go up, but there are people for every price range, and you can fill whatever one everyone makes you happy, brings you joy, and brings you the profit you need to be able to live the life you want to live.
So Jim, when you and I were talking about this the other day, I mentioned if I were starting out right now, I'd be raising my prices every month, a little at a time, a little at a time. What that does also is it gives a sense of urgency. You can say, my prices are going up next month. And if you buy now, you're going to be able to get it at this price. I set my prices in 2016. So I was ready to raise them in 2020, but we had a little hiccup called COVID, and I was forced to close. And a lot of you folks that worked from home were able to continue on, but I couldn't bring clients in here. I wound up doing a Notable People of San Antonio collection for free.
Fantastic project.
And because I needed to have some credibility following on. So my suggestion is, first, look in the mirror and see, where can you up your game? Where do you photograph people? What separates you from other photographers? For me, I tell people I'm not a photographer. I use a medium format phase 1, super expensive view camera. So I'm very different in process from people using a DSLR. I can use a DSLR, but when people come in here and they see my Einstein hair and my intensity, and I'm using a view camera, they think it's like a spaceship. So they think I know what I'm talking about.
Your lights are huge.
Yeah. And I have, in black and white, I use movie lights. In color, I just have a 3-light, very simple setup. But I have lenses that exactly frame where they need to go, so I don't have to crop. I tether. Nobody in the family portrait business tethers. They chimp on the back of their camera. And they thought, the people, when I was following that Bradford Platinum group, they thought I was stupid for sharing all that. And I made the choice to be completely transparent. So like Tabasco shares their recipe for hot sauce. It's very simple. And they say, go ahead, and if you want to try, go for it. But it's hard to do. To sell a $75,000 portrait is not easy. But I'm used to selling high-end stuff, and I have the composition, I have the process, I've got the framing, I've got the printing, I've got the customer service. For a portrait this big behind me, I'll hand deliver it anywhere in the country and do a white glove hanging. Does it cost me thousands of dollars? Sure it does. Do the clients think that they're special? Of course they do. So if you want to raise your price, how do you raise your value? Another thing that I'm sure Jim has talked about repeatedly is the proofing process. How many of you use projection to proof your portraits? You use project? Okay, Jim does. So I'm gonna share something because I compete with painters. So what does a painter have to contend with in today's market? Because these people that are coming to me are thinking about a painting, and I got to talk them into well, there's a camera involved. Well, what else? So I tell them the camera is the smallest component of my process, because it truly is. When I push the button, when I open the shutter, that 500th of a second is when I make my money. When I get that emotion, that moment, like Henri Cartier-Bresson said, the decisive moment. So when you guys, and you men and women and children, when you figure out what that is, you're going to up your game. So then what product are you offering? Are you offering, do you give them a thumb drive and let them choose for themselves? Well, there's not much value in there. Do you have a relationship with Amanda at Digital Pro Lab? I started out having my prints done at Digital Pro Lab. I was an aerospace industrial designer, and I brought my own printing in-house. But for the first few years, that's exactly what I did. And Phil was my man, and I trusted him. So you need to have a really good relationship with your printer. You need to figure out what your framing's going to be. What are your lights going to be? What things do you want to offer? Do you want to take the portraits and hang them for people? I talked to many photographers, and they're like, oh, I don't want the liability. Well, forget that. If someone invites you into their home, that's their castle. It's a big deal. So if you can package the portrait and bring it to them and have the big reveal, it makes them feel good about their legacy. Here's something that's different, but with printed portraits versus digital photography. We have the ability to compete with painters because nobody sits for painting sessions anymore. Who's going to sit for 3 weeks? Nobody. In fact, if you Google or even go on my website, I did a side-by-side comparison of a Buckingham Palace full-length life-size portrait, just like the one behind me, that they'd commissioned of Prince William and Princess Catherine. Big deal. They had some famous UK painter do it. Well, I saw the problems that painter had because they gave the painter camera phone pictures, and it was a wide angle and it distorted Prince William's body. Painters have to guess. You don't have to guess. You can get the real emotion. Now, part of it is you need to convince yourself that you can do that. You can step up and say, yes, Mr. Client, I'm going to give you my best. And then you do it. Now, that's going to take some practice. But when you get good at it, then you're going to find, I think I better raise my prices. And then you bump them up 10%, 20%, then raise them again. My goal is to double my prices in the next 2 years. And that may sound ridiculous to you, but in the nice portrait business, These are called Veblen products. There was a guy named Thorstein Veblen who invented the term conspicuous consumption. And a Veblen product is something that part of its value is derived from the price. So for instance, a Bugatti car. I mean, that's many millions of dollars. Well, part of the reason that a Bugatti is worth that, because they have enough guts to stick a multi-million-dollar price tag on it. A 500-foot yacht, same thing. Part of the value is they get bragging rights. Somebody gets a full-length life-size portrait. Now, are they going to brag to people who are not part of their crew? Of course not. But if somebody has a portrait, that's in their inner circle. Anybody that comes in there, those folks are vetted. They're proud of that. So for instance, that portrait behind me, what does that say about her husband who commissioned the portrait? What does that say about her as a mother, a wife, part of a family? This stuff's important in our world. So the more that you can...
those portraits, about that one is 8 feet tall, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, behind, we can't, on the screen, we're looking at a two-dimensional object. We can see that there's some pretty photographs behind you, but we don't have any idea of how large. So yeah, there you go. Perfect. That's perfect. I'm glad you're doing that. So that is that person is full size. That is how tall she is. If she was standing next to it and lifted up to where her feet level are, she would be just as tall. It's equivalent.
It's a full-length life-size portrait. Now, most of your cameras don't have that resolution, and you haven't done the artistic stuff. Here's some problems. Photoshop behaves poorly at this resolution. I had to completely redefine my tools in Photoshop. Plus, I'm pretty good at anatomy. I've studied anatomy for 40 years, so I know where to push and pull and tug to make it look right. When Michelangelo painted the cherubs in the Sistine Chapel, they're distorted, but they look correct from the floor. So that's part of what you need to start understanding in your work is, where's it going to be? Who's going to see it? What's it going to look like? How do you compose? So if you compose like this, a real tight frame, it looks great on Instagram, but is that how you want it to show on a wall? How do you want it to appear so people will be inclined to get it bigger? And then do you have enough guts to compose it that way so it looks terrible as an 8x10? I figured that out a long time ago. That thing doesn't look very good as an 8x10, but it looks great 8 feet by 5 feet. So that works for me. I do not, I mean, if you want to go into the full-length life-size portrait business, please go for it. You can look at my website. I have every part of my process on there. But I'm 10 years into this, and I'm barely hitting my stride and reaching critical mass. I would have done it in 4, because I strongly believe that if you focus intently on something at the highest level, you can become a master in 4 years. But our work needs time to mature. So portraits that I made in 2014, 2016, they're still relevant now. I have an image that's in the contention for most expensive photograph in the world. It's railroad tracks, and there's a big story behind it, as there's stories behind all of my works. That's another thing you want to think about. If you have a good enough story, then your people are going to buy into your story, and they're going to believe you if you learn your craft. And then that matches what your pricing is. My dad used to tell me something that was very important in this type of stuff. If you match expectations and reality, by definition, you have a good experience. If you're going to be doing bigger works, like this, there's a downside. Everything shows. Draping, a collar. If the guy shows up and his jacket shrunk, we've all experienced that. You know, the women show up and they're pretty put together. Well, the guys, their sleeves are to here and they can't button their jacket. Oh, my jacket shrunk. Well, they just got fat, and you have to deal with it because you're a pro. Well, how do you have in your toolkit a way to salvage that relationship so you can make a sale when they didn't come prepared? I had a guy come in from Fort Worth with 3 kids and a wife, and it was a very, very high-end client. He forgot his shoes, and this was a full-length portrait. He happened to be about my size, and I had a spare set of shoes here, so he wore my shoes. There's been a couple of them that I've had to loan him a tie. I've had to teach these guys how to tie ties because everybody thinks ties aren't going to be in vogue. I'll guarantee you in 3 years, ties are going to be back in fashion. So that's another thing you want to consider. If you're charging a lot of money, do you want something that's trendy or do you want something that's timeless? Either is okay. But what do you want to do for you? And what speaks to you as a professional? So every time you meet with a client, they think, man, am I glad I got this done. I was putting it off, but you know how they always want to, they'd rather have a root canal than get a portrait session. So if you overjoy them and fill them with happiness, they're going to think you're a pro. If they think you're a pro, they'll pay the price if you have enough guts to ask for it, and then don't chicken out. So my suggestion is look at your pricing. Are you pricing for profitability, or are you trying to undercut your competitor photographers so you can gain market share? There's a term for that I didn't come up with called the race to the bottom. And photographers are some of the worst in pricing. Race to the bottom, cheaper, cheaper, cheaper. What happens if you win? So now you're the cheapest. Well, there's somebody's going to come in and you're going to be the target and they're going to do it cheaper than you. And now you're already losing money every session. And you're miserable because if a lot of you folks, if you run the numbers, you lose less money if your studio is empty because you're pricing so low that it actually costs you money to produce. That should scare you. So it's very important to think financially because you have a business. If you have a hobby, that's okay. But if you have a business, that business needs not only to be profitable, but it needs to cash flow. My business is profitable, but if I have a slow month in the summer, it's not pretty. And because my prices are so high, the volume doesn't support it. How'd we do, Jim?
Yeah, it's perfect. I've got a question for you, though.
Okay.
So I want to hear more about your pricing philosophies, general life philosophies, but for different photographers, they do things their way and whatever way they feel is best, as long as they have really researched it and put all their effort for it, it might be the best for what they're trying to do. There's a lot of tools in the toolbox.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you recommend or feel philosophy-wise about photographers having different types of services, different options? For instance, not all if I were to sell an 8x10, there's not one price for 8x10s. It's priced based on how much time I have to put into it. And so it could be a low price if I've just photographed an event, because I photograph events. Now, I don't market that I do that. I only market that I do family portraits. It's only my clients who ask, do you also do, that I would do that for. but I'm not going to charge them. I charge $350 for an 8x10. And I'm not going to charge $350 for an event 8x10. I didn't spend any time with it. It's cheap. As far as I'm pricing based on how much value they get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
Mm-hmm.
one area, but also what's your opinion on discounting? Actually, we talked about that already, so I know the answer. But discounting or a la carte pricing versus package deals. Tell me about your thoughts on these different things.
Well, that's a very good question. Now, I have backed myself in a corner, so I don't discount. If somebody gets a second print, I'll charge them for the art. I might throw in a frame. So I do know how to do that kind of stuff, but I'm very careful to not discount my brand because it's a small community of people, and if somebody got it cheaper, but on the other hand, I do something that scares other photographers. I'm not afraid to give something too. So I either charge or it's a gift with joy. And that is how I get around a lot of stuff. Another thing that I've chosen to do is simplify my offering. We have a lot of photographers, and you look on their website and they do boudoir, newborns, weddings, blah, 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 portraits, events. I mean, stand on your head, take your pick. It's too much. What are you good at? What are you better at than your contemporaries? So if you can simplify your offering and then get very good at it and work out every single part of the process, that's why you got to figure out what a product is. Now, you have a resource, Digital Pro Lab. They can do albums, they can do prints, they can do canvas, they can do metal prints. I mean, if Amanda could probably go for an hour on all the different stuff they can do. I have canvas prints, and then for black and white, either silver gelatin, proper silver gelatin darkroom, or I just brought in Barita fiber Hahnemühle because I have my own printer. But that's been a learning curve, and I had to back up a long way because you have to coat that stuff. So I have to do stuff in here that you don't see. So what do you want to offer? And if you can simplify it to where you don't give them too much choices, that's way better. So when people come in here, they know we're looking at a wall portrait, and they go, I'm ready for my photo shoot. I go, I'm not going to give you a photo shoot because I need to differentiate myself from the person who charges $125 session fee and then gives somebody a thumb drive. Now, here's something else that will scare all of you folks. I don't charge a session fee. If they don't buy, I got a big fat goose egg right here. But I'm confident that every single part of my product offering is good enough. And then I tell them up front, I said, I'm in the print business. I'm in the 200-year business. And I really do think 200 years in the future. So that's the way I can differentiate myself. Now, there's a price to pay for that. Because I'm so intense down this path, I have backed myself into a corner. So I'm kind of like a surgeon, an ER doc, a priest, a rabbi. I meet somebody, size them up, talk for half an hour, then get them in front of the camera. And about half the time, I'll only take one shot. How many of you have enough guts to do that? So the pressure is intense, but from their perspective, they think I know what I'm talking about. And then I have a very simple offering. Color, this way. Black and white, this way. Frames like this. Why gold frames? Well, because that's how we've always done it. It's very simple here. And so the simpler you can get your business to where you want to have the combination of the stuff that you like to do and the stuff that people like to buy from you. That makes sense?
Definitely makes sense. Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. All right. So let's see. Tell me about how your pricing philosophy has changed over time. From when your very first price list, what was your philosophy going into that, all the way to what you've explained is what you do today?
Well, again, I bought this business plan from the Bradford Rally Platinum Group. And so I got a chance to see what another portrait artist who's done it for 30 years has done. And so I started out matching prices with them. And he didn't recommend it to the other people in there. But I had a very developed studio. And see, that's another thing. I do only in studio work. I don't go to a park. I don't meet people at their homes. They have to come here. I have a temperament that works for me because I'm a little bit autistic. And so I'll hyper stimulate in a crowd. And it's not something I like to admit, but I figured out a long time ago, this works better for me. So I meet people in the studio. I can control the light, and I have a very technical setup in black and white that I reverse engineered myself. So I've got something unique, special, and different that other people don't have. Once I figured out who Karsh was and who Harrell was, I bought movie lights off of eBay and refurbished them and figured out how they did it. But nobody had an instruction manual. You guys don't tell your contemporaries how you do your stuff. So I was comfortable with a high-end product, but I was shocked when I saw what these guys were charging nationwide. And because I was charging $500 for 11 by 14 before I went in there, and $200 or $300 for an 8 by 10, and I thought that was a lot of money. Well, then that bumped up to $1,000 for an 8 by 10. Now I'm at $2,000 for an 8 by 10. Now, do my 8 by 10s have relative value at $2,000? Not nearly as much value as $80,000 for a giganto portrait. But I needed to work something out to where people, they'd suffer through and they'd buy that 11 by 14 for $4,000 and get a frame for $475, and they're out the door. And they've got something that's expensive enough to where if the quality's there, they're proud to tell people how much they paid. If the quality's not there, they're embarrassed to tell people how much they paid. And that's why you want to have your act together, have your ducks in a row for every single process. Remember, a point of weakness is a guaranteed point of failure. So you need to have, that's why your fulfillment crew at Digital Pro Lab is so critical, because you're trusting them to make you look good.
That's the truth. All right. Well, I've got another question then.
Okay.
When you're speaking with this potential client, this prospect, first, and I have a not a long question, but it's more than just this initial part. First, how is it normally? Is it via phone? Is it texting, emails, web form? And then what are the actual words you're using? So, you and I could do a just play like I'm the client and you're the studio owner. I want to know exactly what words you're using. So if you want, I could be the client and just pretend like I'm calling. If calling is the number one way that you visit with people, it could be in person. There's a lot of ways that you have initial contact. What is your initial contact generally?
That's a very good thing. So let's talk demographics first. Most of my clients are over 50. Mm-hmm. And so they're more comfortable talking on the phone. Yeah. But they try to push, especially the younger ones, they try to push it to text. And this is a complicated process. If you're going to do a photo shoot of a kid and you're going to get a DVD, you don't have to do much talking. And you can charge a couple of $100 and rock and roll. But if you're going to do something like that, how they prepare is critically important. If their hair's not right, if the outfit's not right, and I tell people this when I have them on the phone, I feel like I have failed them if they come into my studio and see these giganto portraits and go, holy moly, I had no idea what you did. And it happens all the time. So what I do first is I have a very comprehensive website, but consider I'm targeting the royal family in Dubai. I'm targeting the World Economic Forum. I'm targeting somebody from the Monaco Yacht Club. So those people, they're going to have a person who calls and checks me out. So that's why I have everything on the website. It's a lot of information. And I create videos. I do a lot of videos to try to help me avoid the phone problem. So if somebody writes in, I say, I need to talk to you. The only way I book people is after a telephone conversation. And then I can tell these people, I'm not a photographer. I use a camera, but that's the smallest part of the process. You're the biggest part of the process, and I'm going to create a portrait that has the convenience of photography and the longevity and quality of a painting. Now, it took me a hot minute to be able to create a portrait that renders like a painting. So I can tell people I paint with light. I don't ever BS them. I always tell them the truth, because they're like, well, I want this in oil. I have a guy from Hawaii I'm talking to right now, and he bought what, you can buy these nobility things. Well, he bought one, and so he's the grand poobah of something, and I want this in oil. And I said, I don't do oil. I do a modern approach on a traditional portrait. And so my lighting scheme is only 3 lights, but it took me 6 weeks to figure that thing out so I could repeatedly get somebody in, and I know where to put them because the lights illuminate them, plus they illuminate the backdrop. So, stuff like that, I worked out over years of photographing a ladder with a target on it or a chair or something. It's not sexy. My product development is about as boring as you could get. So I figured out how much depth of field I needed. I figured out what light I needed. All this stuff. So when the people came in, I didn't have to futz around with anything. I could pretend like I knew what I was doing because I was relaxed. And if I'm relaxed, they're relaxed. So, and this is where my age benefits me, because I can tell people I've done a lot of things. I've met a lot of people, and I know where you're coming from. I can size you up. I'll take care of you. And I really am an empath, which is, and I tell people, my walls are down and you can mess with me, but I'm going to go in there and steal your soul. You've all had been told that, remember the Indians and native cultures always said they were afraid that you were stealing their soul. Well, maybe there's something to that. So I tell people I have a responsibility. I'm going to steal your soul, and I'm going to take very good care of it and then give it back in better shape than when I took it. The thing about it is, I'm not making this up. I really mean it. And they can tell that I really care. And so now, after 10 years of aiming towards this goal of being known as the portrait artist of the 21st century, I've got a crack at approaching Karsh and Sargent, because they were regular people too, just like you. They were at the top of their game. They worked hard, they suffered, but they eventually got to where they wanted to go. And I think all of you, if you're willing to do the work, and if you'll open your eyes and look at every facet of your business, you'll be able to raise your prices so much more than you thought. And it's going to shock you. The first time you double or triple or quadruple your prices and you're actually making money, and these people, they look at you and they give it to you, you're just going to go, holy moly, this really happened. But how do you take the money? Do you take cash? Is it Zelle? Do you take credit cards? Is it easy for them? How is your guarantee? My guarantee is 100%. If anything happens, I don't care what it is, I make it right. And I've had the canvas lifted up from the panels in the past. I've driven hundreds of miles and picked people's portraits up and swapped them out because it wasn't perfect. So that's the other part. If you're going to raise your prices to my level, you have to have a level of service commensurate with the price. Again, expectations, reality, good experience. Did that help, Jim?
Sure did. Yeah, I appreciate that. I have that's something that I do and that I recommend to my clients is having some sort of very specific guarantee. I have a name for mine called a thrilled guarantee. I don't want my clients to be satisfied. I don't want them, the photograph sitting on the wall, a guest comes over and says, oh, that's a really good photograph. And they say, yeah, it was okay. That's not my goal. I don't want satisfaction.
No.
I can't stand satisfaction. I want thrilled. And so that's my guarantee. I absolutely guarantee you will be thrilled, or I will do whatever it takes to make you thrilled, or I'm just going to give your money back. If you're not thrilled, this is not the right tool. This is not the right thing for you. And so that's my guarantee. And
well, speaking of that,
like something people would take advantage of, but no one's ever taken advantage of it.
Oh, I've had people take advantage. And so, and here I have a piece of paper that they sign that has my guarantee. And I say, this is custom work. We don't offer refunds, but we make it right. And if we can't make it right, I'll offer a reshoot with $1,000 print credit. I've never had to do that. However, I had an Indian family come in with a beautiful traditional Indian saris, and one of the family and one grandmother. And the guy bought. And then he called me up that night from home and he goes, I have to have my money back. And I'm like, what happened? He said, well, the grandmother spoke up and she wouldn't talk in front of you. And she said she wouldn't accept the portrait. And he said, well, why? The other grandparents weren't there. Well, where are they? India. Oh, so against my policy, I just gave them a refund right there on the spot. So having a tough policy, but then understanding the right thing to do is sometimes just doing the right thing for people. That was a classic example. I had another Indian family that got a 24 by 30. They took delivery of it, and the wife said there's too much white space on either side. It was a couple portrait. They wanted an 18 by 30. And so I was like, okay, took it back, had custom frame, custom boards, custom everything, one off. And Jim, you know how much that cost. And I redid it for them and gave them what they want. So that's the kind of stuff. And that's a beautiful term, Jim, a thrill guarantee, because they should be thrilled. If you're a professional, you're doing things that other photographers can't, but usually won't do. Think of that. You have to go the extra mile if you want to charge the rate that's going to make you a good living and keep you out of the poorhouse, and turn it from a hobby to a fine and honorable profession.
Amen. Yeah, that's right. Well, how about some photographers have implemented some type of psychological pricing strategies. Now, I want to make sure I'm clear on psychological. That sounds like a negative. This is as simple as someone choosing the difference between something that costs $1,000 or $9.99 or $9.99.99. That is a psychological pricing strategy. There's a ton of different psychological pricing strategies.
Yes.
Have you made some choices that are in that category? And have you come across some others that you might want to share your thoughts on?
So you sent me a thing about some of these pricing strategies, and $9.99.99, that implies a value, a bargain, 10,000 implies quality. So my numbers, I've got even numbers.
Nice.
And see, and all of you all ought to go car shopping and look at the difference between going to a Kia dealership and going to a Mercedes dealership. If you go on the Kia lot, there's going to be 10 starving, hungry salesmen. And when you hit the door, they're going to say, you'll see a sign for them that says, do not come in the door without a customer. So they pounce on you. You go into a Mercedes dealership and they're like, oh, hello, Mr. Landers. How are you? And they've already Googled you. They know who you are.
Yeah.
I Zillow everybody's address. I know where they live. I've looked them up on LinkedIn. I find areas of, that we have in common. I want to be friends for life with these people. So I used to sell cars. I used to sell bonds. I sold high-end airplane stuff. I sold $1.5 million product for a Boeing 777 one time. So I know about high-end selling. The psychological stuff I do is very subtle, and they're never going to know that I'm using sales techniques, because really what I'm doing is I'm helping them do what they want to do anyway, is spend their hard-earned money in a way that delights them. And like Jim says, thrills them. They want to, this will blow your mind. They want to spend the money if it's a value. Now, if it's a ripoff, they will get embarrassed behind your back, and then you're going to get blamed for it. And so that's how you can get a Kia, and they go, God, this thing's a crappy car. But you get a really nice car, and you're like, man, I feel better. They're both cars. They both have 4 wheels and a steering wheel and a seat belt. But you get in a Bentley and you feel different. And so if you're dealing with a likeness of someone, how's it going to make them feel? How long is it going to last? What story does that say? Now, I tell people I think 200 years in advance, and I really do. But I don't meet people in public. I meet them here next to the work, because if I'm at a cocktail party doing the talking like I am now, they're going to think I'm nuts. But if I'm standing next to an $80,000 portrait with the frame behind me, maybe not so crazy after all, maybe crazy like a fox. So my intensity matches the work, and that's why I meet people here in the studio, and that's it. And I don't have the skills that many of you have to go out and socialize. I wish I did, but I don't. So I've had to work around that, and I make videos so I can introduce myself to people online, where I normally, if I were cold calling, I'd never get past the gatekeeper. So did we get off track, Jim, or did that answer your question?
Well, it's all on track because it helps. It's catching a different angle, a different purpose, a different reason for all the different things we go through, all the decisions that we're making, the client sales process that we go through from the beginning. How the client sales process begins before that first phone call. It's beginning with your interaction on the website or any other place where you can be found. So Facebook and Instagram, and et cetera. It begins there. It goes through that time when they've called you or however they reached out to you the first time. If you have some kind of a planning process that you do, then it's there. Then it's the session itself. Then the post-production process and showing them their photographs and going through everything until it gets installed on their wall and they get to enjoy it every day of their life and cry tears of joy as they walk past it. And so every single piece of this,
it all matters.
It, and it's all matters. Yes, man. It's amazing how many different variables there are in a photography business. None of them are difficult. There's just a lot of variables. But that's a fantastic thing because this is an art, and everything about it that you contribute to it is also an art because it helps to tell whatever story, whatever it is you're trying to convey, because you're conveying their story through portraiture, but you're also doing it in a fashion that it's your best, the best things that you have available to you to use as
Hmm.
tools to help that make that a reality, make it happen. And so
Yes.
what you study, what you spend the most time with, you become over time really good at it, and you become very focused, and you get better. But if you spread yourself out too thin, there is so much to learn that if you studied photography every day from age 20 till the day you died as a full-time job, nothing other than research, you would still not learn everything there is to know about photography. And so
You're
it
correct.
makes sense to narrow things down. So you feel the same way about all that stuff?
Absolutely. And here's something about photography. Cameras are easy to operate. When do you open the shutter? That's what they're paying you for. When do you do that? Do you have enough guts to wait until it's right? Or do you just put it down and get to and 6 shots and spray and pray? And there's plenty of folks out there that's what they're comfortable with. I used to shoot, I cut my teeth shooting sports and bike racers. And so I learned perspective photographing bike racers. And all these guys were standing up. And I was like, this is going to be a whole lot more fun if I'm laying down. So I got right on the edge of the course and I laid down, and I used to race bicycles. So I knew they could see me, but I would feel their pedals brush my hair, and they're going 35 miles an hour. It scared everybody else, but I knew the guys and women, and I knew they weren't going to hit me. I never got hit, but I could frame a shot in a way that made it look really dramatic. So, the things that you learn about composition, about how you interact with people, all of that stuff goes into the work. And at the end of the day, you're going to deliver them something that they're going to go, okay. Or like you say, Jim, they're going to go, wow, I'm thrilled. And that's why we do this. If you can thrill somebody and blow them away with excellence, then all of the pain and suffering that you've done, and I know every one of you have suffered, and you're not finished suffering either. That's the name of the game. But it's worth it. I wouldn't trade one day of suffering for the joy of having somebody say, I've worked a lifetime to build a legacy, and I trust you to create a likeness that will represent me for 200 years.
I agree. There's a photographer up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, named Charles Lewis, who says, I don't work for the dollars. I work for the tears. Now, he's talking about the tears of joy when you see the photographs, but that's how he says it. I don't work for the dollars.
Yeah.
I work for the tears.
And he's done it a long time.
I don't know what year he started. I think it's probably the 60s or 70s. And I believe he's still doing it. I know he teaches.
Yeah, he and his son have the teaching business.
And his son is too. And Thomas Morelli out of Maine, they have worked together. I assume they're all still working on the project of elevating photographers. But yeah, there's a lot of things that I resonate with him and many other photographers as well. And so too many of us, I think, are islands. We're not really spending enough time beyond our circles and seeing who else is out there. Like you mentioned Karst, that might be foreign to someone. They may have never even heard that name before. They may not have even realized that was a photographer when you said that. You gave all the context to show that, even if you didn't say the word photographer. But if they're not familiar because it's outside of their circle, it doesn't mean anything to them. But I want it to, and you want it to. We want to expand beyond just the people that we know here in this general area or people, the places we've been, and just get the opinions of our contemporaries. Go way beyond that. Take classes from lots of different sources. Sure, I teach photography, but I don't think anyone should be limited to what I share. I may share a lot. I mean, written a lot of classes, but that doesn't mean I know everything, and I couldn't possibly have every angle covered. And so hearing things from lots of different points of view, hearing from Kevin, hearing from other photographers who have had different experiences. Oh man, the value in that is tremendous.
If you're going to charge the rate, you're an artist. You are an artist. If you're going to charge what I do, that's why I don't tell people I'm a photographer. And I don't associate with photographers. I don't care what lens you're using. Doesn't matter to me. But another person exposed me to Sargent and Karsh and Harrell, and I learned street photography, and I realized that there's other people I relate to there. So what I did is I studied the state of the art of people who have done this before, because that's a pattern that works. And so if it worked for Sargent, and if it worked for Karsh, and if I work hard enough and smart enough, I can make it work now, because everybody else is talking about Nikon versus Canon or Sony or whatever. Clients don't care about that stuff. Do you think a surgeon talking to a patient, do you think the patient's going to ask him what kind of scalpel that person uses? So here's the thing. This is a very intimate process. And that's why I say our role is like a surgeon. A surgeon gets paid a lot of money to get a knife and cut you open. If that happened in a back alley, that person would go to jail, and they're cutting somebody open. So you are peering into somebody's soul. They're trusting you. What are you going to do with that trust? Where is your basis of credibility to where they're going to believe you? That's why I looked at the other artists, and just figured out what they did. I figured out the gallery system's rigged, so I'm not trying to get my work in galleries. Going direct to collectors is better, and they like it better. Works better for me, works better for them. So each of you can figure out what works for you, often by process of elimination. So the first thing you want to decide is, what am I not going to do? For me, newborns, forget about it. On the other hand, when I first started doing family portraits, I had a pediatrician come in here, and he had his wife and then about a 5-year-old son and a little tiny baby. No baby with no hair. I don't have any kids. So I was thinking baby with no hair. And I was arrogant in that assumption, because the baby had brain cancer, terminal brain cancer. And so I got a shot of the baby was fussing on mom's lap, and it was daddy's little girl. So he grabbed her and she grabbed onto his little lapels. Click, that was the shot. And they went big. I did my artistry and I made that baby look healthy. So months later, when they came in to get the portrait, because I wasn't hanging them at that point, they brought the baby in out of hospice. That baby died 2 days later. But they have a healthy baby above their mantle now. So I'm not in the newborn business, but for that particular instance, I made that baby healthy for their parents, and they'll never forget it. That's the thrill of art.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I knew this was a calling. And all of you guys, this is, if you're a real artist, it's going to be a calling, because it's hard work. This is hard. Let's not kid ourselves. The cameras are easy, so that means anybody can go to Best Buy, get them a camera, go to moo.com, get them a business card. Now they're a professional photographer. Yusuf Karsh apprenticed for 3 years, unpaid, because this was an apprentice trade. He'd taken 7,000 portraits before he made the portrait of Winston Churchill in December 30th, 1941, that made the cover of Life magazine. And it happened to sway American sentiment that caused us to side with Britain and Russia rather than Hitler. You might not know that Roosevelt at the time was 50-50 whether to go with Hitler. And Charles Lindbergh, the guy who flew across the Atlantic, he was the America First guy. Hitler was very popular. We could have gone that way. The winners write the history books. But I was struck in 2014 when I saw that photograph, and I was like, wow, one portrait has that much power. And that's what set me on this path to do the work. So eventually, I figure I got a good 20, 25 years left in me. I want to be known as the portrait artist of the 21st century. Is it easy? No way. I've really suffered, but it's a joyful mission because it's a calling. And I know many of you have a calling and you really want to do this and do it well. And I'm so thankful that you're looking into Jim's wisdom, because he can help you skip steps in the path. You know, skip rungs of the ladder, make it a lot easier, because it's hard enough as it is.
It's a good way to describe it. That is what a photography and business teacher has the potential to do. So I appreciate you saying that.
Well, it's brutally hard to monetize an art is extremely hard to do. So any of you folks that are able to get any money for it, you're ahead of the game. Now all you have to do is up your game and refine it and listen to Jim and lean on people like Amanda, because they can make your job easier. I built an outsourced business in aviation, so I understand a lot of this outsourced stuff. What you're doing with Amanda and Digital Pro Lab is you're building an outsourced relationship so you don't have to buy that stuff. And you can't afford to buy it and do the learning curve on it at first. I outsourced to 3 different printers before I realized I needed to pull it back in myself.
There's someone who commented. He's from Arizona. This is Robert No, and he's commenting about what you said about apprenticing. This isn't the norm anymore. It still has massive value, but everyone's saying, "Well, what's in it for me?" And they're not seeing how the experience is what's in it for them. They're thinking the answer to the question, "What's in it for me?" has to have a dollar sign next to it, or it's got no value, which is, by my standards, insane. There's a lot of experiences that don't cost money, so or you don't get paid for, that have tremendous value. So,
can I comment on Robert's statement there?
Yes.
What I'm reading is, it's harder to find portrait work for other studios to apprentice with, since all those places in the 80s and 90s are no more. I respectfully submit that you don't need to go to school. You've got YouTube. You've got you're apprenticing yourself. There's a wealth of knowledge online.
Yes, there is.
I didn't need to go to school. I mean, Jim, I know you're doing a good job there, but
no, everybody learns.
I had to learn on my own.
YouTube
so
University is a fantastic tool to be able to learn things, especially if you've got a question right now and you just go to YouTube and ask it.
Yeah.
There's the chances are there's someone who's answering something similar. It may not be exactly what you're looking for, but it could be helpful anyway. The problem is there are so many times when we don't know what the questions are. I mean, how many times have we been in situations where we were silent because we didn't even know what questions to ask? That's where
that's the role you're doing.
For those who like to learn in person, everybody learns differently. Some people can, and I say this every once in a while, but some people can read a manual for a camera and have it, understand it. Whereas I would fall asleep if I tried to read that darn thing. So I don't even bother. I will use it as a reference material, like a dictionary, when I want to find something specific, but that's about it.
Well, Jim, you're performing the role of the studio, and your students are performing the role of apprentice. It's a little bit different, but it's the same thing, because an apprentice is basically being taught by somebody who knows what they're doing, and you've been around the block, and you've got the structure where you can actually scale it, and they're truly apprenticing through you. And I'll tell you what, this may blow your mind. It's cheaper to go through Jim than to do it my way, which was the hard way. You don't want to know how many financial mistakes I made going down blind alleys and trying something and it didn't work. And so you have a wealth of knowledge with Jim. So think if you want to build a business, There's two entities right there, Jim to help you with the technique, and Amanda and Digital Pro Lab to help you with the product, because you do not want to get in to fulfillment. You don't have the infrastructure for it. You want to get good at creating the image and because you're interfacing with the client, you're actually doing the hard part. So Jim can help you with that. But then as soon as you can pass off to someone like Digital Pro Lab and let them handle the printing, it's way better. Now, see, I specialized on this gigantic stuff, and I was fine. There's a printer in Tennessee that does this big stuff, but I didn't like their quality, and I held their feet to the fire, and FedEx back and forth and weeks of delay, and I was like, finally, screw this! I'm getting my own printer, and I'm going to figure it out. And I learned how to do all the stuff that makes that print the same brightness as a digital file. Amanda knows how to do it. Yeah.
And go back to the print again, just so everybody has an idea of the size of that print that's behind you. Earlier in the show, you walked back there. I want you to do that again, if you don't mind.
It's 96 inches tall, 60 inches wide, with a 6-inch frame.
Is that big, guys, or what? How many of you have printed something that size? I mean, most people have not ever printed anything even half of that size, and so it's an impressive size. It's traditional to be able to do something like that. When you go to a museum, there's many pieces of art that are that size, some that are quite a bit larger, but you really don't see quite as many of the small ones. They exist as well, but generally they're the larger ones. And the target market that Kevin has is not quite as interested in the 5x7s and 8x10s as they are something that is an heirloom to be proud of. And so that's the target market that he has. And you guys can target a similar target market, or you could target whatever it is you want. There's a ton of stuff because photography touches every aspect of our lives. Kevin, can you believe we've come to the end of this? We've gone through this so quickly. You just went through everything so buttery smooth that it feels like no time has passed, but we're at the end. And so do you have any last minute comments you want to share? I mean, you probably have said, you absolutely have said a ton, but if you've got a last couple of words you wanted to share, go ahead.
My advice to all of you is to slow down, take a deep breath, and commit. If you're all in with what you're doing and you keep good records and you know what works and what doesn't, then you're going to continually improve, because small improvements add up over time. This big printing stuff took forever to learn. And you don't do just one of those. I can't remember how many times I screwed something up and had to reprint that thing. And when you're reprinting something that size, you feel it in your pocketbook. So this is 10 years of work to where I can repeatedly do something like this. So for you, think about what you're good at. Think about what you're not good at that you need to get good at, and then focus on that. That's probably the last thing that people need to think of. A musician tends to practice what they're good at, but what they need to do is practice what they're not good at. And if you want to be a next level photographer, you need to spend most of your time doing the stuff you're not good at. Is it boring? Yes. Is it scary? Yes. Are the other people who are competing with you that are going to beat you if you don't get it together? They're doing the stuff that matters. It's like lifting weights. It's delayed gratification. It takes discipline and focus, but it's worth it. Every time you blow a customer away with excellence, you forget the pain. And I congratulate every single one of you for taking the time to look at what Jim put together and hear my ranting. But you can have a successful photography business. And here's another thing. It's relatively recession proof. If you aim for people that are successful, they're going to be successful in down times. If you aim down at the bottom, everybody's broke already and they're singing the blues, and that makes you feel bad. So thank you for taking the time and listen to Jim and listen to the folks at Digital Pro Lab. They're good people. I've known them a long time, and they will keep you out of trouble, and they'll help you. They'll keep you from spending money the wrong way so you can put it in your pocket. How's that for a closer, Jim?
That's fantastic, Kevin. Kevin, I sure do appreciate you being here and sharing all your thoughts and your experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, the things that you're even embarrassed about. You just bared it all. And I know I appreciate it. I believe that other people appreciate it too. So yeah, thank you so much for dedicating your time, being willing to share your feelings and your thoughts. You, like everybody, has things that they have to do. So you sacrifice something to be here because you believe in us as photographers and the photography industry. And so this is something that I appreciate, and all of us, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you, folks. And everybody out there in the interwebs, I wish you the best, and just go for it. This is a good profession. It's worth the effort.
Thank you, Kevin. Whew, man, is he fantastic or what? He shared so much stuff. I mean, maybe I asked some questions that were both here and there, but there's just a lot of the stuff that he shared with us. You guys, if you appreciated any of what you just heard, would you do me a favor, go over to the comments and say, thanks, Kevin, or thanks for the show, or I appreciate what I heard, or just something that says thank you for the time and attention and caring that you saw here on today's show. Now, as you know, the photography, the Portrait Profits is every single Monday. Every single Monday. Now, on the second Monday of each month, we move it to 6:30 in the evening, Central Standard Time. But on every other day of the week, it is on noon on Mondays. And so let me share with you the upcoming shows on the Portrait Profit Show real quick. So in 1 week from today, I'll put that on the screen. I'm going to change how it looks though. There we go. So we have what's called the perfect price list 1 week from today. And let me put that on the screen. There we go. So on March 18th at noon, the perfect price list. Now, this what we're going to be doing is the steps to create the mindset so that we can create the perfect price list. Yes, there is a perfect price list. And no, it doesn't have to do with what other photographers charge, not unless you're high volume. But the Portrait Profit Show is about low volume portrait photographers. Therefore, your price has nothing to do with what other photographers charge. If you think it does, this show will prove to you using math that it has nothing to do with what other photographers charge. Do not miss this show. If your price list is already perfect, all right, go ahead and do something else. But if it isn't, if it can use a little bit of improvement, or you just want to hear a different point of view, put this on your calendar. Perfect price list 1 week from today, March 18th at noon. All right. 1 week after that, on March 25th, it's the client workflow. And this is so that you give your clients the best client experience. That's something we all say we want to give. We want our clients to have a good experience when we're working with them. You want them to have something to brag about when they're talking to their friends so they can refer you. How do you actually make that happen? Because what I have found in talking with, and I'm not exaggerating, thousands of photographers, is that you guys do the same things. All of the photographers are pretty much doing the same thing. You are not standing out from the crowd. What's it going to take to do that? Well, for starters, putting client workflow for the best client experience on your calendar on March 25th at noon. Put it on your calendar. I hope to see you there. And then 1 week after that, we're not in March anymore. We're on April 1st. And yes, we're going to have even though it's April Fool's Day, we are still going to have an episode of the Portrait Profit Show. And it's not going to be silly. It's going to be serious. We're going to talk about the entire client process from before you have an opportunity to talk to them all the way to whatever your end result is. So for me, it's installation of the prints on the wall, but for everyone, it's something different. Some people do prints, some people don't. So we'll talk about all of those. And when you get to the point where it's not what you do anymore, you just may listen for curiosity. But we're going to go through every step in the client process, from before doing the marketing, during the sales process, the photography process, everything is going to be on April 1st, the entire client process. Right? You got those on your calendar? I hope so. I sure hope so. Today we've been talking about how I decided on my prices. And we had a wonderful guest on. Uh, Kevin shared so many different things about his philosophies and the way he does things. And sure, some of those things are going to be the way you do it, others aren't. But still, we can learn from every single part of it because there's so much there, so much experience. If you need to rewatch this, just watch it in the feed because it stays there. I don't delete them. You may have to search for it because there's a lot of stuff in the news feed that comes up, or you may go to our YouTube channel and go straight to it. But I want to remind you, when you go to the YouTube channel, there's the pre-recorded that's on the main page. If you want stuff that was done live, like the Portrait Profit Show, you actually have to click the live button to see the list of those videos, because only the pre-recorded stuff is on the main page. You have to go to the live streams, the live. It just says live. It's just a little button across the top. Click on live, and you'll see the 150 shows that 158, as you can see on here, shows that we've done so far. So thank you guys for being here today. I really appreciate you. I appreciate what you do to help the photography community. I want to thank you for your time here today. You're sacrificing something to be here. You obviously want to do something better for your world, but you're also, by default, uplifting other photographers by continuing to grow. And I want to thank you for that. You rock. I encourage you to click the like button, to click the love button. I encourage you to share the Portrait Profit Show, because we want other photographers to be uplifted as well. When we uplift each other, the entire industry is uplifted. And when you have this thought of those prices are too high, no one will pay them. Well, if every photographer were to watch this show, do you think we'd have very many in the extremely low category of where they're not even making a profit? Nope. Because they would be charging enough to reach their ideal life. So share this with others because it uplifts you when you do. For Landers Photography School and Digital Pro Lab, my name is Jim Landers, and I bring you the weekly Portrait Profit Show. We have evolving content. We've got tips, systems, step-by-step methods on how to do a lot of different things on the mystery side of photography, the business side. And all these things just constantly realign you to the path that you want to be on anyway. So I want to thank you for investing your time here on the Portrait Profit Show. And I look forward to watching you grow. Appreciate you guys. Bye for now.